Hi, everyone. Welcome to the official Walt Disney Birthplace Podcast. It all started with a house. I'm your host, Maria Massid.
And I'm your host, Jacqueline Kroll. So I actually just got back from Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando. I was there to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the park, which is crazy. And I was actually there for the 25th anniversary when I was 4, and seeing how much the park has grown for the 50th and how they celebrated it was absolutely magical. And one of the things I was thinking about was just the overall atmosphere and how they take movies and bring sounds from those movies and characters and put them in the parks to create this crazy immersive experience. And I was also thinking about how each land has its own sound that we may not consciously even register that, oh my goodness, each area of the park has a soundtrack. And just hearing, like the train, well, obviously love trains, and hearing the Walt Disney Railroad and hearing people bustle around Main Street and everything, I was just truly amazed how many different sounds and noises there are in the parks, and all these just bring back and trigger all these memories of childhood going to the parks and movies, and it was so cool. So I was going to ask you, what sounds do you associate with Disney?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I am so jealous that you're able to go to Walt Disney World for the 50th anniversary. Like, how cool is that? So very jealous. But second of all, to answer your question, I guess, what sounds do I associate with Disney? For me, since I am so interested in the movies, I think that the da, 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 that theme when they introduce all of their movies, When You Wish Upon a Star, that is something that I definitely associate with Disney, or any like shimmering sounds that are sort of like, here's like some magic that's about to happen. I think that those are all very, very Disney oriented. And I'll say that when I was working at the Disney store a few years ago, some sounds that kind of popped up a lot were just a lot of like Mickey Mouse originals, where they would have on the screen, I know that they have been closing a lot of Disney stores across the country. But back when we did have Disney stores, there would be a TV and there would be these Mickey shorts on there. And so it was kind of a cool way of connecting like the timeless element of the brand to like actual like shopping experiences that people were experiencing in the now. But I think for me, just having like that voice of Mickey Mouse was something that I can always associate with Disney. And especially since Mickey Mouse was originally voiced by Walt Disney himself. I don't know. It just feels like Mickey is just so like critical to how the Disney brand is perceived. And like, as soon as you hear that high pitched voice, you kind of know you're kind of in for a special treat, because Mickey Mouse embodies so much of what makes Disney great. So for me, because the Disney, in the Disney store, there was always a Mickey Mouse short kind of going on in the background. Probably the voice of Mickey Mouse too. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the official Walt Disney Birthplace Podcast. Today on It All Started with a House, we've got someone with one of the most recognizable voices in Hollywood. Bret Iwan is the voice of Mickey Mouse. And not only is he the voice of Mickey Mouse, but he's also an avid proponent of historical restoration and the Walt Disney Birthplace. So Jacqueline and I are really excited to speak to him today about all of that. And happy to have you guys all along for the ride. So hi, Bret, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. And that was a fantastic intro, if I do say so myself.
Oh, thank you. We're happy to have you here. So I'll start it off by having Jacqueline, I guess, tee it off.
Great. So where are you in the world today, first of all?
I am situated right now in my office which is on the back of my workshop. So office workshop at my home in Pasadena, California.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you have 2 very exciting projects coming up that are releasing this summer, both with Disney. So if you could tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah. Well, ironically, they both are releasing on the same day, which I just discovered myself when informing you guys about it. But the first is a brand new TV show that we're really excited about called Mickey Mouse Funhouse. I know it sounds very similar to titles you've heard in the past, but it's a new adventure with Mickey and the gang where they go out to this fun house that they actually have out in the woods. And the fun house is actually alive. They call him Funny. And Funny has the capabilities to take Mickey and the gang on any type of adventure they can dream up. by going up the stairs to anywhere, which will transport them through doorways that take them to, medieval times, westerns, underwater, all kinds of fun things. So the stories are story potential is endless. It's been a lot of fun. It's really fun to work on it. It's been a blast to work on previous series that are somewhat educational but fun, and just give people put a smile on people's face, and kids love it, adults love it, and this show is no different. It's going to be a blast, and I particularly love some of the art styles they're going after, because being an artist myself, I pay attention to things like the background and the animation style, and they've been really inspired to go back to a more Freddie Moore proportions on Mickey, which is cool. He's still 3D, but he's got a little bit more of that squashy rounded shape that we're familiar with. And the background paintings are beautiful too. They're gonna look like they're painted, as opposed to a plastic CG world. So really excited about that. And then the other project that comes out on the same day is I had the honor of designing for Disney Parks Merchandise as part of their artist series that's releasing this fall on August 20th. I did a fashion collection, which I'm not sure I ever imagined I'd do that. I'm not sure anybody who knows me would assume that I do a fashion collection, but I was so honored, and I said absolutely yes. And so it's a collection that's inspired by the doodles I make while recording Mickey. So if you ever have the chance to come with me to the studio, come on by. I'd love to have you. But you'll see that I'm always drawing. Like, I take notes, and sometimes I'm even drawing Mickey as opposed to writing a sentiment. I'll draw Mickey and the expression that translates to that line. And so, looking back on some scripts and trying to think, like, what is my style of Mickey? What would I do to represent Mickey? I thought, well, I'm the voice of Mickey, but how does that translate to art? And I saw a script I was working on. I was like, that's it. So the collection is made up of patterns based on the doodles that I draw and the little notes that I write. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. It's got like a backpack, a t-shirt, a hat, and it's stuff I would wear. So it's not like I just threw my name on something as part of a collection. Like, I really love it. Looking forward to that. And I hope that it just opens like Mickey Mouse Funhouse. I hope that the doors are endless, and it just takes me on an adventure to anywhere. So that's what I got coming up.
Jack of all trades, and both doodling Mickey and his voice. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So before we get into your very unique job, we kind of wanted to go into your background visiting the birthplace here, Maria.
Oh yeah. Well, gosh, I mean, it was probably 2 years ago now that I was in Chicago visiting with some friends, and this light bulb kind of went off, and I remembered, oh my gosh, the birthplace. And so I reached out and was like, any chance I can stop by? And you guys were so gracious to invite me over, and I got to see what's been happening, all the restoration work that's been doing, as well as some of the concept renderings for the plans, and the community involvement that's associated with everything you're doing. And it was so surreal to be there, so exciting. It's just like there's nothing like, I've always said, when you invite someone over to your home is when you're really being vulnerable, and when you're really letting someone in, and it's kind of like a new step in that relationship, right? So there's something special that happens when you cross the threshold of someone's home, and knowing that not only did Walt Disney spend a good portion of his childhood there, but his dad built the home, Flora and Elias built it like that. There's something really magical about that, something that you can't find anywhere else. I mean, that's above Disneyland even, So I had a blast. I can't wait to go back. It wasn't enough time. We were on our way to the airport, so we had to cut it a little short, but oh man, I loved it. I loved everything about it.
Yeah, it really is a magical place. And I'm so glad that you had a chance to stop by and see it. I think that it's amazing just to kind of be in the same atmosphere and the same house where it really all started. What was it like as the voice of Mickey when that Walt was the original voice of Mickey, just stepping into those same areas that little boy, when he was growing up, he took in all that inspiration from that neighborhood. What was that like for you? How did it feel?
Well, it really just kind of awoken my own childhood memories in a way, because so much, and anytime I tell my story, I can't help but picture the little 2, 3, 4-year-old Brett and the house I grew up in, because my great grandparents built the house I grew up in. And it was just a really special place to me. And we had to move away when I was in high school, which was just really hard because I imagined I was going to be in that house forever. And so, I still, when I dream about going home, I dream about going to that house. Of all the places I've lived, in my dreams, when I'm like, oh, I got to get home, I always show up to that house, which I think is, I probably should talk to a shrink about it. But there's something powerful about the homes you're raised in, especially at that age. And so, one of the most important things to me about voicing Mickey is preserving the legacy that Walt Disney started. Like it's not lost on me. Mickey is huge right now. He's been huge, but it always like funnels down to Walt Disney. Like regardless of what Mickey's done and what things he's been a part of or what theme parks exist, it all comes down to Walt Disney. And I, you hear it said all the time, Walt was Mickey and Mickey was Walt. So, it's like, it's just going to the house is like peeling back more of those layers. We hear a lot about Walt's history, and you can read a lot about it, but going to those places, especially a place like the birthplace, it's not someplace that everyone has the chance to go to, because it's not Disneyland. No one's planning their vacation around going to it necessarily. But when you do get to go there, it's like, I'm not even sure I can come up with the right phrase for it. It's like I said, peeling back those layers, and you're just like, you can't help but think, what was it like to live here? Like what did Walt take away from this house? Maybe even subconsciously, like, did he remember the casings around the doors, or the narrow staircase, or the screen door on the front porch? Like what of those things were carried with him through all of his life, and influence things like Main Street on Disneyland, or a set on a movie. So it's just really cool to think that it really is like, being there is witnessing the seed of something that just ended up growing into something so big. But yeah, it's just, everyone has an origin story, and that's part of Walt's, and it's pretty incredible. So voicing Mickey, knowing I'm doing something that Walt did himself is pretty cool in its own right. But then to know that this role has given me the opportunities to form relationships with people like yourselves and the birthplace, that allow me to go visit someplace like that. Like it's just mind blowing. So I remember standing there just kind of being like, this is surreal. This is crazy. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question, but
no,
yeah,
I think you
tangent of info for you.
I think you absolutely did. And that was an amazing response. I mean, I think you're absolutely onto something. Thinking through my own childhood, growing up in Chicago myself, that house that I grew up in was so integral to who I was growing up. And it was such an experience moving away for the first time. And to your point, just about, when you're in that early childhood phase, age 0 to 4, there's a lot of who you are that's being formed during that time. And those were the years that Walt spent in that house. So I think you're onto something there, Brett. Truly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And it just struck me when you said that another thing I couldn't help but think about is Elias's role in that house, right? Like he built it. And as a craftsman myself, somebody who likes woodworking and building things and especially restoring things, I know that you don't invest, like what's required of you in building something is an investment. Like you literally are putting your blood, sweat, and tears into things, right? Like your muscle, your effort. And so I can't imagine what Elias felt towards that house. And maybe he hated it. Maybe when they moved, he didn't care, but I highly doubt that, because as any creative person knows, especially a craftsman, like you're putting yourself into it. You're planning those details. You're making the choices that end up making or forming a house. Like there's nothing quite like taking something from the ground up, and that's what I've experienced in restoration, especially because you kind of are going in the reverse. to then do the same. Like you kind of take it apart to build it back up again. And it's like a forensic autopsy in a way, right? Like you're learning the story of the building or the furniture piece or the train, like I'm doing currently. It's there's an exploration that happens. And yeah, when I was there, I just remember thinking I was jealous of the craftsmen who get to work on that home, because I would love to be pulling back, trim and lifting up floorboards and just seeing how things were made and realizing, oh, this wall used to be there, but it was moved here. And that's interesting. I wonder why that happened. And anyway, so yeah, I think it's so cool to know that even before Walt, his family, his parents had such an impact on that place, literally by building it from the ground up. So that's incredible. That's a piece of history that you can't replicate.
Right, exactly. And there are so many instances of finding those pieces of his parents in the house, whether it's, a horseshoe that's been lodged between two walls for good luck that hadn't been found in, hundreds, not hundreds, but, decades.
Yeah.
Hasn't been around for hundreds of years yet. But finding things where they had a small, very discreet under the floorboards, kind of like I don't want to say hole in the ground. It wasn't
a
like
cubby,
that.
a secret storage, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Just like
Yeah.
a small cubby where they would store their secret documents in their master bedroom. I mean, those types of touches you can't find in the houses today.
Yeah.
And so just knowing that those decisions were made by his parents, very impactful, especially to see it in real life.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And that was one of my favorite pieces, actually, was that little cubby in the master bedroom. The house I grew up in, my great grandparents actually, and this may have been common occurrence back in the 40s, but they installed a safe in the floor. So we had this room that we called our toy room because it ended up being where we had most of our toys. But you open up a little flap and there was a safe in there. And as a kid, I thought that was the coolest thing, like to have a secret hiding place. Like, come on, it's like a treasure hunt.
That's amazing. And I mean, aside from restoring things, if anyone has gone to any of your social media accounts, they obviously see your love and fascination with trains, just like Walt. But your father also inspired that. So if you can tell us a little bit about how you got into trains.
Yeah, I have to laugh when you say that, because there's been a few people I've seen comments on my social media that'll say, I don't know if I associate you more with Mickey or trains, because I see it when I look back. It's like I go through phases where I'm posting all a bunch of trains and then I'll post a bunch of Mickey. And yeah, it's much like when we talk about Mickey later on. Mickey's been in my life as long as I can remember. The same goes for trains. My dad is an avid expert model railroader. And so I grew up around trains. We had a train running on our family room ceiling. He built a giant HO in that same toy room I just mentioned. He previously took it over with a huge layout with mountains and rivers and trestles and bridges. And, that was my personal Disneyland, because I'd stand up on a stool and I'd look at all the little scenes he'd made, because he'd have all these little people doing things or animals and, put in different grasses and trees. And I just remember staring at it. And to me, storytelling was synonymous with train sets, because my dad was modeling railroads, but in doing that he was telling a story, and it just like transported me to this world of imagination, and I loved it. Later on he took down my swing set and sandbox that he had built me when I was younger, and we built a garden railroad together in the backyard. So it was kind of also this fun, not to always equate the story along with Walt's journey, but it was this really fun thing that trains provided us, this ability to create, to dream, but then to kind of always have a way of progressing it a bit further, to take it a step beyond. And so, you start with a little train and you get a little bigger, and then it moves outside. And currently we have a backyard railroad that we built as a family. My dad built the train. We all put the track down together, literally hammering spikes and bending rail. And it runs around my brother's home up in Northern California. And so we took it a step further even. Yeah, so my dad, I really attribute my love of trains to him. Later on in life, I think it moved from an appreciation of the storytelling and the imagination that came with model trains, and just really kind of coincided with my love of restoration and vintage things and historical things. And so I became even more fascinated with the mechanics behind trains, and decided that, I they were cool to look at and cool to visit, but I really wanted to know how they worked. And more importantly, I wanted to be able to work a steam locomotive. I wanted to be able to drive a steam train. And it was something that I had on my, bucket list for someday when I'm retired. And I couldn't tell you why, but one day I just thought, why am I waiting till I'm retired? Like, why don't I pursue that now? Um, and so I did. Again, thanks to a lot of the fantastic relationships I formed in this role, I was able to reach out to some people I'd met through Disneyland, and they introduced me to some people they knew. And I started to visit different various personal railroads, and got some tips from people on how to get started. Fast forward a while later, I ended up getting a job at Knott's Berry Farm theme park here in Southern California. Um, not necessarily a competitor of Disneyland, but Disneyland's neighbor, I think is what we like to say. And I was working on their railroad. They have two locomotives from the 1880s, that used to live in Colorado, and they're still operating. And I was part of the maintenance crew that worked on them and serviced them and operated them daily. And that was a dream come true for me. I was just a kid playing. People would often say, like, why are you doing this? You're the voice of Mickey. You've got a job. You've got a career. Why are you here, driving trains? And I was like, because I love it. Like, it's so much fun. Unfortunately, my schedule got to the point where I couldn't do both. So I had to say goodbye to my Knott's family for a while. But yeah, that love, kind of similar to the model train thing, it just keeps progressing. And I recently just took on what potentially could be the biggest restoration project of my life, but I acquired a locomotive frame from 1904 that used to belong to a mine out in South Dakota, and it's sitting here in the workshop right behind me. I'm gonna build my own steam train, and build a railroad on some land that we have up in Northern California. So, it's just, for me, trains are one, a hobby. It's a fascination, but it's a fun escape. It's a connection to my childhood. It's literally a vehicle for my imagination. Like, I just I dream of the things associated with it, and it just, like, it transports me. It's fun to do something that's not normal. Well, maybe not. That's the wrong phrase to use. It's not that it's not normal, but not common, we'll say. A lot of guys will take on car projects, or I don't know, maybe they're into brewing their own beer, but I'm interested in building a steam train. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, I don't think I've ever met somebody who has the ability to restore a train. So that's amazing. And
Thank
definitely, I'm impressed. So definitely want to see what that will look like once the final product is done. So
Yeah, well, me too. And I have to say, I won't claim to know everything about doing something like this, but in any of the projects I've taken on, whether it's voice acting or graphic design, artistry, or restoration, it's for me, it's about accepting the fact that you might not know everything about that particular project you're tackling, but being open to learning about it has been the most useful tool that I've ever encountered in my career life. And the same goes for building a steam train. I know a lot. I've learned a lot, but I have a lot more to learn. And the fun about a project like this is I know I'm going to encounter things I don't know how to do, which is going to require me to reach out to people who do know. And I often say, like, you'd be surprised how willing people are to share their information with you when they see how excited you are about something. When you're passionate about something, that passion is contagious, and other people, even sometimes people who might not necessarily want to be a part of it. I just connected with somebody I knew through some other jobs, and I said, hey, I'm working on this train. I might need to tap into you. your experiences with some of these mechanical things. And he goes, you know what, for you, I would. He goes, but normally I'm not into trains, but for you, I'll help you on this. So, like I said, if people see that you're passionate about it, then hopefully it'll inspire them to jump on board, pun intended.
Wow, that's amazing. And I guess your love for restoration extends beyond trains, right? I know you have an interest in restoring old things. So thinking through just like the value of the Walt Disney Birthplace and your interest there, what do you see, I guess, as that core value for the birthplace, given your passion for these vintage type of artifacts?
Yeah, well, I think the term artifact is perfect for a place like the birthplace. It's an artifact, it's a treasure. It has historical significance, and it might not be the first thing someone thinks of when they think of Walt Disney, but it's just as relevant to his story as any other piece of the more publicized story. And I think what I love about the birthplace is when I first learned about it, I remember thinking, no way, that house still exists. I think all too often we have a tendency to just assume things in the past are gone, or maybe not accessible in the way that you would want them to be. We get so used to reading about things or seeing it in a documentary, and you just assume it's no longer there. So when I get really fired up and excited is when I realize that it's still there. And more importantly, someone is taking the time to preserve it. Restoration is it's storytelling. Really, it's taking something that has maybe lived a life and gone through the decades and whatnot, and it's deciding that it is worth bringing back to maybe not its original condition, but to some point along its story that's going to be relevant to preserving its story, and beneficial to people in the future. And I think that's exactly what the birthplace does. Like, you guys have put so much effort into restoring it in a way that's going to tell a story, and that's what I love. Like, there are people in the restoration world who often think, I guess you can call them purists, people who think that you need to bring something back to the way it was when it came off of the manufacturing floor. The projects I do, I rarely go to that extreme, because to me, seeing the wear and tear on something is the character of it. It's the heart of it, right? Like, I would hate if I walked into the birthplace and was told, oh yeah, we replaced all the hardwood floors and the stair treads, and we took all this stuff down, and we're gonna build it right back how it was. It's like, no, like, I remember the newel posts in particular, and the railings in the staircase, and things like that, where it's like, that's so cool, because that little 4-year-old Walt may have been holding on to those spindles as he walked up the stairs. His dad used it for sure. He may have built it or milled it himself, who knows. But yeah, I feel like I'm rambling, because you've hit something I'm really excited about, and so I don't always have the most streamlined thought process. But yeah, I think at the heart of restoration is heart. Like, it's storytelling, and it's about, sometimes it's even less about the objects as much as it is about the people who contributed to it. I think that's true of a house. I think that's true of a train. I think that's true of a car. When we restore things like that, you're trying to get back to tell the story of the people who made it, the people who are a part of it. And yeah, I think that's exactly what the birthplace does, right? It's at least that's what we hope people take away from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there was a quote from Walt that was about how he really valued people at the core, and that you can't really make things happen without people. And so I love what you've just said, Brett, because the birthplace really is about the people behind it. It's about the Disney family and their lives, and how that slice of life around the turn of the century in Chicago really comes through with that.
Yeah. And, what I mentioned in the beginning of it is also just how impressed I was with the community involvement and how important the community is to the birthplace. I think, I often wonder, like, how many of those members of the community knew the significance of that house before the restoration effort started, and maybe a few of them did, but how exciting it must be to watch, their community kind of had brought a spotlight onto it and been like, that house, how cool is that? And that's where I have a real passion for, kind of shedding a light on lesser known stories. I think there's there's always the people, especially in today's society, it's influencers, right? It's who has the most likes or the most followers who kind of get all the attention. But there are so many interesting stories being told, below the threshold of Instagram likes. And personally, I've been involved with a family over the past couple of years that I admired from afar as a child. Just really impressed by the patriarch, the father's creativity and his engineering skills, and I befriended them, and I've found out that really they're just like a humble, quiet family who, yeah, their dad did these amazing things, but he has since passed, and their story, their collective story, is just kind of something that they're holding on to, and I just love the idea of more people getting exposed to stories like that. And so I've been working with them just to try and just make their story known, let people know about their family's creativity and contributions to this small town that they're a part of. And so, yeah, I think anytime there's an opportunity to shed light on a lesser known story, it's fantastic, because it's not the norm. It's not the glossy, sexy story that people might be going after, but yeah, it's equally as relevant and sometimes even more valuable, I think. Seems normal, right?
Very normal. That's awesome though. And it's such a funny story about, I feel like all my friends in Florida, their first thing that they do is they buy that AP pass.
Oh yeah.
So,
I mean, you can't miss the opportunity. If you're close by, why not?
so I assume that when you actually got the part to being Mickey's voice, it was kind of maybe an unimaginable moment, right? Like it happened, and it was an amazing thing. And it's quite a legacy to fulfill, right? Especially when you've got people like Walt Disney that you've got to fill in the shoes for. So thinking through the people in the past who have voiced Mickey, what have you learned, I guess, from that experience and the reflections of stepping into those big shoes, even though the mouse is small?
Well, depending on who you ask, they are pretty big yellow shoes to fill. Yeah, thankfully, being the Mickey fan and the Disney fan that I was, the legacy behind the character was never lost on me. Like I mentioned, I auditioned to be an understudy, and that meant I was auditioning to work with the voice of Mickey at the time, who was Wayne Allwine. He had been doing it for 32 years, so I was really familiar with the body of work he had been a part of. But then, of course, I knew that the voice of Mickey before him was a gentleman named Jimmy McDonald, who was a sound engineer and sound effects guru at the studio, responsible for all kinds of Foley sounds that you would hear in any of the Disney silly symphonies or the features. I even remember as a kid watching a special where he was on and he was kind of demonstrating some of his sound effects, and he had two coconuts, and he was showing how if you moved them on top of a surface, it sounded like a horse running. And I remember being like, "Mom, I want a coconut." And the next time she came back from the grocery store, she had bought me a coconut. She hollowed it out. My dad cut it in half, and I had my own little clip-cloppy horse hooves to do sound effects. So I was aware of Jimmy long before I ever associated him with the voice of Mickey Mouse. And then, of course, Walt. I knew that he was the voice of Mickey in the beginning, and for several decades after that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a matter of one, acknowledging what they contributed, just in referencing their body of work. I love to go back. Just even the other night, I was on Disney Plus, just not really sure what to watch, and so I was clicking on different shorts, and I'm watching everything from oh gosh, Mickey and the Seal, Mr. Mouse Takes a Trip, and listening to Walt's, when he's trying to hide Pluto in the train car, and Pete's the conductor, and it's just like some really great content there where it's Walt Mickey, right? Yeah, come on, Pluto. And then switching over to something that Jimmy McDonald did, and hearing like the slightest difference, maybe in vocal register or vocal tone, and then similarly listening to something Wayne did, like The Prince and the Pauper, one of the favorites of mine. Well, I just want to get my dog back. I don't know why I always reference that line, but there's just in watching them, it's a different actor performing the character. And like I said, sometimes there's little different voice nuances. I know that I don't always hit exactly the same notes as the previous guys did before me, but what I recognized in going back and studying them and their performances is that what they were bringing to the microphone was the essence of Mickey, the character traits of Mickey, and really an awareness of Mickey. Obviously Walt knew who Mickey was because it was based so much on his own personality, but other influences in the acting and entertainment world at the time he was created. And Jimmy McDonald being so ingrained in that studio culture and knowing what the Disney brand was about, and definitely would have known Mickey. And similarly, Wayne Allwine was Jimmy McDonald's apprentice before he became the voice of Mickey. He was working as a sound effects engineer as well. So, these guys were around that, and they knew Mickey. Now, I was working at Hallmark Greeting Cards when I got this audition information. I had gone to school for illustration. I was living out my illustration career path. So I was not in the studio, not ingrained in that culture, but my fandom and, the reason I got into art was because of Mickey. I grew up watching Walt and Mickey. And so that's why I wanted to be a creative person. So even though I wasn't at the studio, excuse me, even though I wasn't at the studio, I had kind of been indoctrinated, I guess, with all of that stuff that I grew up watching and was still watching as an adult. Like I was just a true fan. So, your question, what did I maybe gain or learn from those individuals who worked before me as the voice of Mickey? I think, I owe everything to them in terms of what I bring to the character now, because Jimmy McDonald, in an interview, was quoted as telling Wayne Allwine, after he had been cast as the voice of Mickey, he said, "Remember, kid, you're only filling in for the boss." And that's kind of how Jimmy McDonald started. Was Walt had gotten so busy, and Walt said, "I'm too busy, call Jimmy." So Jimmy started voicing Mickey. And then sometimes a lesser known fact is that Walt actually then came back. That was around, I think, 47 is when Walt kind of handed it over to Jimmy McDonald when they were creating Fun and Fancy Free. But then Walt came back in 1955, actually, when they started making the Mickey Mouse Club. And if you watch those intros to the Mickey Mouse Club, where Mickey comes out and says, "Hi, Mouseketeers," that's actually Walt Disney again doing it, because he had stepped in on a recording session for that. And he's like, I can do that. And so they had Walt record Mickey for those intros. So Monday through Friday, the intros are Walt Disney recording Mickey then. So it's really just about preserving the legacy. It's about carrying on the legacy that they created, that Walt created, but then that Jimmy and Wayne protected and preserved for so long. Like that's what I take away from them. And sadly, I didn't get to work as Wayne's understudy because he passed away before I was officially cast. But I had the honor of getting to know Russi, his wife, who was the voice of Minnie Mouse for almost as long. And unfortunately, she passed away a couple of years ago. But I was able to get to know so much more about Wayne on a personal level, which then translates into how he handled his role as Mickey. But I was able to get to know him through his wife, Russi, which I think there's no better way to get to know somebody. So I just had the benefit of having all these people around me that really, truly cared about the legacy, one, but also the character. I work with fantastic people who do care. It matters how this character is portrayed and what he says and what he doesn't say, and how he acts. And so, it's intimidating, but more than that, it's fun because it's such an amazing lineage and such an amazing honor to be even the smallest part of it. I've gone around and talked to various groups over the years, and I have a presentation, and in that presentation I include a clip of Wayne, who in an interview says, I'm Mickey number 3. There's going to be a Mickey number 4. And he's like, if you're out there, start practicing. And I was probably, 4 or 5 when that interview took place. And who knows if I saw it or not. I saw it eventually. So I often say, I'm the 4th person to be the official voice of Mickey, but there's going to be a 5th person after me who's going to come on and take on the responsibility. So, I guess I should say to them, start practicing, but also know your history, know your character, appreciate the lineage that comes before, and try to do your best job, the best job you can, filling in for the boss.
Before I get to your next question, what does one do to celebrate after you're being told, hey, you're Mickey?
Well, I was at the time commuting from Kansas City out to LA, which I'm from LA, so it was home, but my immediate family doesn't live in the city anymore. So I was kind of by myself, just waiting for a ride to the airport. And I decided to walk to Bob's Big Boy, which was around the corner, and I got a patty melt, and I just kind of sat there and was like, well, this is weird. I'm gonna voice Mickey Mouse. That's weird. And I had more time to kill, so I made a little further walk down a couple blocks away is the Disney studio. And I don't think anyone's ever asked me this, so I haven't shared, but I put on my headphones and I played When You Wish Upon a Star, and I walked around the Disney studio a lot and just kind of, I remember walking around thinking, oh my God, my life's about to change. And I didn't quite know to what extent or how it would look, but I can say now, 12 years later, that it has changed. And I've changed, and it hasn't always been easy. It's been a fun journey, don't get me wrong, but it's been a journey. It's involved work, and yeah, so that's how I celebrated. I had some alone time.
And the most fitting way to celebrate with that song. That's as classic as you can get for Disney, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, going along with that, you had so much to learn being a new voice actor. What was maybe the most unexpected or odd thing you had to learn along the way, whether that be during the audition process or throughout the years?
Man, I mean, there's been so much. One, I will say the most important thing is acting. And, I had done acting in high school, in drama and plays and musicals. But I had no formal training in acting. So I think I had a lot to learn in that avenue. So I learned a lot through experience. Each project just brought a new lesson. I took voice acting classes. I took some singing lessons. I kind of just wanted to absorb all types of acting. And so Netflix binging was a true tool for me. I was just watching all kinds of different dramas and different acting styles. And surprisingly, I remember it sometimes being surprised. I'm like, oh, I'm learning stuff. Like, I'm seeing how this person or that actor attacked that line, and it's teaching me. So acting is the biggest thing. Of course there's technique, and that just kind of came, again, going back to what I mentioned when I was talking about restoration. It's kind of just being open to it, and being willing to admit when you don't know. I remember my very first audition in person for Disney. The sound engineer said, do you want the cans or do you want the monitor? And I had no idea what he meant. And I remember thinking it was like fight or flight, right? Like, either play it like you know it, like fake it till you make it, or just own up to the fact that you don't know. And I said, you know what? Whatever you want, whatever you think's best. I was like, because I don't know what either one of those are. And he goes, well, cans are headphones. Monitor is the speaker in front of you. He's like, I think you're going to like the cans because you can hear yourself better. So turns out, as evident by me wearing these now, I like the cans. I like hearing myself. It helps. So technique. And then I guess the third thing, if I was to add a third thing, it's just learning, how you stay consistent in your portrayal of a character. I've had the blessing of working as Mickey, who is an animated character that probably works more than any other animated character, because he's on everything from pressure cookers to video games to TV shows. And yeah, every different project presents a new acting requirement. And so, yeah, it's just kind of trial by fire, and different variety of projects have helped me learn all kinds of things about acting and myself and my own abilities and what I can and can't do and sometimes shouldn't do. So.
Yeah, I think that's all really helpful learnings, I think, for any aspiring voice actor. And I know that we talked a little bit about kids and, especially very young children earlier in the show. So kind of taking this a little bit full circle, if you had any advice to give to either a parent who's listening and trying to get ideas for how they can incorporate more creativity into a young child's life, or let's say that there is a very precocious young listener listening right now. Do you have any advice, I guess, to give about children wanting to get into a creative industry like this?
Yeah. I always say that I was very fortunate to have two parents who themselves, excuse me, who themselves are very creative. So I grew up in a creative household where they were always redecorating or remodeling, or, as I mentioned earlier, my dad was a train guy. So I had that influence around me, and with that came acknowledgement on their part at a very early age that I was, one, interested in these things, but then perhaps maybe possessed some of the talents required of the things I was interested in. So they did everything they could to foster that. They, were just and still are my biggest fans, my biggest advocates. I remember growing up really kind of thinking there was nothing I couldn't do. And, sometimes that's an overused phrase or it's cliche when it comes to children, but it was impactful. I lived it. I believed it. So I necessarily wasn't afraid to pursue the things that I was really interested in. And again, thank God I had parents like that who fostered it. So I guess advice to a parent would be to just be open to the excitement the child might possess when it comes to any particular creative field. And creative fields are scary because they don't necessarily offer the stability that so many other career choices might. So I understand the tendency for us to say, well, you might not want to become an artist. You should probably become a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. But I say, even if ultimately they don't end up becoming that creative choice, that creativity, that encouragement, that imagination is only going to benefit them down the line when they do become mayor or a fireman or a postman. Like, that creativity will open them up to so much more in life. It'll broaden them to ways of learning, ways of thinking. So I really, the sky's the limit, I think. And I would just encourage a parent or anyone who has influence over a creative child to just, foster that creativity. I don't have kids of my own. I have 6 nieces and nephews now, and I love to see how creative they can be. And, I make sure that even when I get the FaceTime and I'm in the middle of some stressful project and I just don't have the time to really talk to them, I answer it. And if they're showing me, the other night they were showing me the Beanie Babies that they set up in a zoo in the bedroom, and they wanted to take me around to each and every pile of Beanie Babies and tell me why they did it. And, I remember thinking, I don't have time for this, but I made time for it because they were so excited. And I know how important it was for me developing to just have, the ear of a willing adult to encourage it. And so I make sure that I'm not claiming I'm perfect, but I do try to be very conscious of those moments when you can just kind of say, yeah, that's great. Good. Awesome job. Good for you. Keep doing it. So that's the advice I would hope to give.
I think that's right on. Everyone needs some validation creatively every so
Yes.
often. So
It does. And I mean, you have so many different creative avenues, but voicing Mickey, I mean, you've had to have some really creative and unique projects that you've had to work on. Do you have maybe a favorite or most unusual over the years?
I have too many favorites to go into. We'll have to do a whole other podcast about that. Unique. I mentioned pressure cooker earlier. Like, I don't know why that popped into my head, but I literally did a Mickey, I can't remember if it's a pressure cooker or a steamer. It was some kitchen appliance that was so random, like a rice cooker maybe. And I just didn't understand why Mickey, it was a crock pot. It was a crock pot. It's a talking Mickey crock pot. Something I know, if somebody had said, do you want to be the voice of Mickey and work on talking Mickey crock pots? I would have been like, you're a crock pot. What are you talking about? But that's, I've done that and Stranger that I'm sure I will think of after this.
I can only imagine the amount of appliances and random things your voice is in.
Yeah. My voice is places I will never go.
Yeah.
I just know that.
Well, we can't thank you enough for sitting down with us, and we can't wait to see your new show and your new Disney Parks line. So where can people follow you on social media?
Oh, please follow me on the social. At Bret_Iwan is my main account. That's where you'll find all things Disney and train nerd and occasional, insights into my family and personal life that you probably could care less about, but I posted anyway. And then if you're interested at all in the restoration projects I do, you can find me at Bungalow Modern. That's where you'll see my crazy, early 1900 chuck wagon I'm working on, or the 1904 steam train, or just a pretty picture of my house with clouds behind it, because sometimes the lighting's just right.
Yeah, and who doesn't love to see like beautiful house pictures? I know I go on Zillow way too much to look at that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Bret, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you both, and I hope to see you real soon. So long.
I cannot believe the way that Bret celebrated learning the news that he was Mickey Mouse. And I also can't even fathom the fact that he had no voice experience prior to landing the role of an icon such as Mickey Mouse that even Walt had before him. That is just mind-boggling to me.
I agree with you, Jacqueline. I think that it really brings home that anything is possible. Dreams can come true if only you have the courage to chase them. And isn't that what Disney is all about? Yes, we are so proud of Bret at the Walt Disney Birthplace. He's been such a fabulous partner to us, and very excited and proud of all of his success as well. On social media, we will be teasing more clues for our next guest, but we'll leave you with this one clue. They work at the Disney company currently, and they take care of Walt's legacy. Can you guess who our guest might be? Be sure to tune in on social media for more clues and updates on the Walt Disney Birthplace. On Facebook, you can search for the Walt Disney Birthplace. On Instagram, we are at Walt Disney Birthplace. And on Twitter, we are WD Birthplace. And you can find those links to our channels in the description. So I don't know about you, Jacqueline, but I think I will be putting on some popcorn later today and settling on my couch to watch a good amount of Mickey shorts. This episode with Bret has really kind of sparked my taste for that. How about you?
I am ready to eat a Mickey pretzel or anything Mickey-shaped waffle, bar, whatever that may be.
Ooh, yes, I love that. Awesome. Well, I can't wait for that. And we will talk to you all next time. See you real soon.
And remember, it all started with a house.